All right, Monday night on Twitch. It is 6:30 Central Standard Time, and that means it is time for us to go on a bit of a journey in our gaming worlds. So you can see we've got the map set up on the large screen right behind me. And we have also got a little bit of our world map showing. So this world map, of course, is my game world of Earth that I have been creating since probably 1987 or 88. So a long time created and currently in use for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Now, before we get too deep into it, I'm going to adjust the screens a little bit because we are going to be looking at changing up. The past few weeks, we've really covered a lot on a campaign called Upon the Throne of Blood. And with that campaign, it is designed for 10th to 16th level characters. Progressing them up to 16th, so through 15th level. And we did a lot of deep dives onto the regions of the northern aspects of where the campaign is going to be taking place. A place called Deutschland. You can see it on the screen to my right. Unless things are going opposite, should be on your left-hand screen. So the area is the northern aspect of that continent, and that is where we are dropping the characters at level 10. We explored 3 different areas in there, along with the religious, political, / noble, and commoner types of peoples that the players will run into. Talked about regionality and how it's all centered off of the primary large capital city, and how those aspects are going to be coming together and ultimately driving story forward through trails of breadcrumbs leading to different areas of the continent for further adventure opportunities. One of the things I always tell a lot of newer GMs, though, is don't go too deep too fast, especially if it's not going to be used. So really for that campaign aspect, we have covered a great depth of the game area that we're going to explore in those levels in that campaign. And I don't want to spend a lot more time going through and doing even deeper products or deeper dives into that aspect, just because the deeper we go, the more work it is for us at the beginning. And what happens if the players or the characters never get to really explore and experience some of the things? Then it can feel like work that we've done that's just wasted. So knowing when to say when is super important. And with that aspect, again, we have 3 real good deep dives onto areas. We know we've got a limited amount of time in this campaign, limited amount of levels, limited amount of adventure days. So how much time is going to be spent with the characters exploring aspects of the area and the civilization? Not as much as a longer running campaign. And part of that is by design. Of course, with this aspect, it was all designed to be a carryover story from a current campaign that we're going, that's taking the characters partway through 10th level, basically. So it is there just really as kind of a follow-up piece. Generally, I don't do things like that with my campaigns, but the players were really interested in exploring those aspects, seeing what the next chapter of this story is. So I really wanted to build something that they could enjoy and explore. Now, all of my players in this campaign, where we went from 1st to 10th level, are very new. It's a very new player group, and by very new, what I mean is they have not explored my game world. So we've been gaming close to a year and a half, maybe almost 2 years. I guess about a year and a half. And so we're not brand new. We haven't just met, but relatively new compared to previous game groups that I've had the opportunity to play with. And as players, they have not gone through and really learned about the world of Earth. And I don't require it because that's knowledge that their characters will know, and they're welcome to ask me if those types of elements ever come up. And of course, if they're ever interested, I have plenty of information to hand them should they want it. But I don't require them to go through and read the world lore or anything like that. I've got a couple of handouts that I can spend quickly, depending on how much information they're asking for. I've got basically just a one page that gives a kind of overview of the legends and lore in the world itself, along with a map. And then I have about a 5-page that talks about character aspects in the game world based on different areas. So it goes into a little bit onto each of the lands. Now that one has not been updated since I started playing 5th edition. So some of those elements may have changed based on previous games I've run. And then I have a world lore book that's super thick and goes through and just records details that have occurred in the gaming world since I first started putting it together, which was 2nd edition when I started really collecting everything. So a lot of information. And it's so overwhelming that I would not expect a player to read through that just in preparation for a game. But I thought as we continue this journey and talk about the gaming worlds, what would be fun is talking about campaign starting and progression from level 1. And so I went through and was thinking about after this campaign. Now I do have a level 16 to 20 that I had planned to run the group that I'm, one of the groups that I'm GMing that we've been working with, running them through after this fresh one that I'm creating just to continue the storyation. But I've played through that campaign 3 different times for 5th edition, and just recently ended it maybe a month and a half ago, almost 2 months ago. So I wasn't really feeling like, you know what, I want to do it again. It's a great story. It's very, in my opinion, very fun. The feedback I've gotten from my players have been fantastic. Basically, the premise is they start the campaign at level 16 dead, and they are basically resurrected by the gods to complete tasks on behalf of a kind of union of the gods. And they start with nothing, so they have to go through and adventure just to get arms and equipment. And of course it is in that higher tier aspect. And then the culmination basically is on behalf of the gods, where if they win the gods' favor, they can be resurrected into the material plane. And if they fail, then ultimately it means the fabric of reality dissolves. And what do you know, it was just a different multiversal plane of Earth. So it is a fun game. It is a fun aspect. Very challenging for players, but in a great way, because they're able to take these high-level characters on adventures that really allow them access to very high-tier magic items and arms and armor, and really utilize a lot of the feats and abilities and skills that come with that high-tier character. So it's a lot of fun in many ways, but also very challenging, just because they don't have that, hoarded bag of holding that they can reach into at any moment's notice to start the game with. But I thought rather than doing that, I'm actually looking for a clean start. And I've got two gaming groups that I've decided I want to start just a level 1 campaign and work them up through. I'd love to be able to do it to 20. It really depends on, of course, player engagement and time that it takes. So I really wanted to take a very basic premise and build it into a game. So this would continue in the world of Earth, but where currently the time frame is at about the almost 600th year of this age, I want to fast forward a little bit and move it up. And I'm going to move this camera here a little bit here now, just so I can grab my cheat sheet. We'll talk a little bit about kind of what my initial process and headspace has been on this and why. Let me change one thing here real quick. I just realized I have left my airbrush plugged in, and I like to unplug it just so I don't get any surges or anything, because I don't have, aside from the wall protector, a regular surge protector there. So I went through and just started looking at the basics of a level 1 campaign. What is the aspect that I want to do? And there are a lot of good bits of information on starting campaigns, world creating, and I utilize a lot of different information that I've learned along the way. So I went through and just came up with a very simple prophecy. And the prophecy states, "A spear in the night sky will signal a fog that will forever engulf the world. Heralded with silence by the broken flock of birds, and only the wasted dead can show how to prevent it." So that's the prophecy. I wanted to have something very prophetic, because the type of campaign that I want to run is going to be it's still going to be a high fantasy blended with a bit of epic fantasy. Again, I run good aligned campaigns, so I want the player characters to be good heroes. Now, good is a relative aspect. However, those are the types of campaigns that I enjoy running the most. Kind of good versus evil. I like my evil to be clearly defined and evil. And I want my good to be good and looking out for the betterment of the people, the world, aspects of good. I want them to confront evil for the sake of overcoming evil. And you can't expressly tell your players how to run their characters or anything, but I let all my players know up front that's the type of games that I like to play, that's the type of setup that I'm going to be providing, and you'll get the most enjoyment out of it, as well as myself, if we have good aligned characters. So I don't get into the nitty-gritty of what alignment are they. Are they lawful good? Are they neutral good? Are they chaotic good? I don't get into that whatsoever, aside from starting point, just so I know how they're going to be at the onset of the campaign. But my overall thought process on this was I wanted something that started with a prophecy, or early on a prophecy was provided, that ultimately is going to be the culmination of this adventure. And so I want to break the prophecy down and kind of get to where I created this and why. So a spear in the night sky, for me, that's a planar alignment. It is an alignment of the planets and moons of a Earth in a straight line right down the center of the horizon. So that's the spear in the night sky. So planar alignments are not overly common in regular, astronomical aspects. They can be, very consistent in their timing and everything, but they don't happen once a year. They don't happen every month. They don't happen every week. So for full proper alignment with all the planets, and then in addition there are 2 moons to deal with as well in a Earth. Having that spear in the night sky is going to be kind of the timeline. So I've yet to establish what that timeline is. Still some aspects that I'll need to work on, but there will be a planar alignment in the night sky. So that's going to signal a fog that will forever engulf the world. So this again is a little more mystical aspect to say, not that a fog or the mists of Ravenloft or anything like that. The fog that will forever engulf the world is a mutation, not a mutation. It's based off of Hades, the gray wastes. So the fog that will engulf the world is not a literal fog, it's a metaphorical fog for the gray wastes of Hades. Heralded with the silence by the broken flock of birds. So it will come because the broken flock of birds are silent. So basically the broken flock is the PCs. It's a broken flock because they're not all going to be the same race or class. So it's a broken flock. It is not just a standard flock of birds. And again, just metaphorical. But if they do nothing and say nothing and don't explore it, then when that planar alignment happens, the gray wastes will have a foothold onto the material plane and start engulfing the world. So only the wasted dead can show how to prevent it. So the wasted dead, that's the most literal aspect of this entire prophecy. The wasted dead are the souls that are currently suffering before dissipating or becoming larvae in the actual gray wastes of Hades. Only they'll be able to show how to prevent it, and the goal is hopefully for the characters to go into the gray wastes and discover why the wasted dead are suffering, what brought them to that aspect, and ultimately what does that mean for their eternal spirits, and what does it mean is going to happen to the world if they don't act. Excuse me. So starting with that prophecy, that is going to be the kind of jarring into action, I'm hoping, for the player characters. Now, I broke this up into tier play, and if you go through the DM's guide, there are 4 tiers of play. Tier 1 is basically level 1 to 4, where they're kind of local heroes. Tier 2, levels 5 to 10, where they're heroes of the realm. Tier 3, levels 11 to 16, they're masters of the realm. And then Tier 4, levels 17 to 20, they're masters of the world. So I broke it into those tiers and then started thinking about what aspects of those tier leveling plays are going to be the most important. Because you don't expect for the local heroes to be going into the gray wastes, let's say. If that's not where the game is taking place, then they're not the local heroes, right? So I started thinking about how am I going to get my characters from point A, level 1, they're just deciding that they want to become adventurers, right? They do not have massive experience. They haven't been slaying dragons and giants and ogres for decades on end. They're level 1 adventurers. They've just decided You know what, there's something here, I'm going to go out adventuring. So from that aspect, how then am I going to get them brought together as a group and then ultimately to address this prophecy or become part of the prophecy? So breaking it down by those tiers, thinking of local heroes, generally a lot of times, even with good coordination, the characters are not always from the same town, the same even region. And so how can I corral those cats into one location at one time to start the game? And my thought was, I'm going to set up a premise of them going out to seek adventure on this main road when these horrible storms start kicking in and driving them into this inn in a city. And yes, I am going to start them in a tavern, in an inn. And these massive, horrific storms are going to drive them all into one location, one place, one time. And that's where they will ultimately hear about the prophecy and hopefully be able to come together as a gaming group to decide, okay, we're going to create this adventuring party. So I'm going to lay out some adventures for them that are going to set them up as heroes of the locality. And if you break down the adventuring levels in that first tier, you can see to move from level 1 to level 2, they need 1 adventuring day, so about 6 encounters. To move from level 2 to level 3, another adventuring day. To move from level 3 to level 4, you're needing about 1.5 days. And then to move from level 4 into level 5, they'll need about 2.25 days. So in total, you're looking at about 5.5 days. Just over 5.75 is what it equates to. So each adventuring day should have 6 encounters on average. So I'm able to break it down and decide how do I want them to tackle those days, those adventuring days locally. So I just marked down some generic things. Clear the woods, clear the fields, clear the hills, clear the canals. And I started with that. Super basic, super simple. These can be adjusted, they can be changed. The biggest aspect now is, where do I start them? So we know this last campaign that I've been working on with this group specifically is taking place right in here, in this area. Prior to that, we have been in an area called Espar, and I've done lots of gamings up in this area and down in this area. We've done little bits in Haveen. We've done Erland. Brock is a pretty wild land with big ties into both orc cultures and elven cultures. And I've explored that in a few different campaigns. So I'm trying to decide, do I go with an area that I have not played a lot in on either the northern or southern aspects of the map? Or do I go back to an area that I've played in quite a bit and can bring in some of the legends and lore? So I have not yet fully decided that out. That's one of the aspects I need to do, because as I set up this adventuring element, this location, I need to look at what is going to be the location, what's going to be that local aspect, how does that play into the kingdom aspect when they are becoming both heroes of the realm and masters of the realm. Now, I like to keep my stories somewhat contained so that while I want this big massive game world that my players and their characters can explore, I also want to keep things manageable. So if I think about characters who are moving around the globe pretty quickly and easily as they're adventuring, it's a lot to coordinate and plan, and it can be very challenging for a GM. Now, if I only had one gaming group, this wouldn't be as bad, but I manage a lot of gaming groups. So the amount of work that I put into this one campaign, I've either got to make it feasible to run multiple gaming groups through, or keep it manageable for the time allotment that I have. So I've got a lot of thoughts that I still need to explore on where I'm going to put this, especially for that tier 1, because that's that local stake in the ground that you're saying this is where we're going to start, and then starting to build out from there. What does that kingdom mean when they become heroes of the realm and masters of the realm? Because again, those aren't world, that's just the larger realm. Now I did start going through, because as I'm thinking about some of the aspects of this game that I want to do, what are some of the tie-ins, what's that backbone story that I want to do? Because ultimately the story is going to go with the elements of Hades manifesting on the world. And so having to think about that, moving from that local aspect into the masters of the world, I need to start putting the blueprint of that spine for the story together. So for my tier 2, I put together just a very simple aspect. Now we know they're going to save the locality, they'll become heroes of the locality, and then branch out into more realm aspiring aspects. So one of the big things that I wanted to do was put out who is the ultimate nemesis of this aspect. Who is bringing about this prophecy? Why is it coming together? So I just put a quick name in there of Drethel. And then I looked at aspects opposite of Hades, which is the fields of Elysium. And going through some of the aspects there where things are very good, not lawful or chaotic, but good aligned. What are some of the things that tie into Elysium? And one of the biggest things that I noted was an aspect of the agricultural pantheons that kind of have their roots in Elysium. There is an element to some of them called the mystic cornucopia. The mystic cornucopia, which is a great symbol of agriculture, farm and field, as well as abundance, I guess, which you would think it was going to be important to a good people of the realm, right? Having abundance. That means they can sell more. That means they're fed, they're happy. That's the opposite of the gray waste. When you have an abundance, you're going to be more happy, where the gray waste you have just nothing but sorrow and no emotion, no happiness whatsoever. There's just nothing. So a great aspect of the opposite of the gray wastes. So Drethel wants to get his hands on the mystic cornucopia, and he wants to do it by the winter solstice. So I put that really important, because the winter solstice is going to be a time where it's going to be the halfway point of a year, basically. And if you're at the winter solstice, you've got a little bit more of winter before spring comes. However, that's the most bleak, the darkest. That's when things are at their roughest. So if he gets his hands on this mystic cornucopia, it's going to take away hope. It's going to take away some of that happiness. So that's this villain's goal, is to get that from these temples, these agricultural temples. But he's having difficulty getting it by using underdark brutes because of the guardians of the fields. So the guardians of the fields I took right from Elysium. They have guardians of the shields. So this is going to be a faction that I'll have to build out. And they're guardians of the fields because they believe in Elysium, and their goal is to make sure that good aligned people have peace and plenty and are able to then move into Elysium when they pass this world by. So the guardians of the fields, I'll have to do some work on creating and figuring out who they are and what they're about, as well as the mystic cornucopia. I'm going to come up with what it is and why it's important and why it's moving around in different temples. And the thought of it moving around to different temples came because when they get into that level 5, when they're moving on from being local heroes to heroes of the realm, I want them to remember initially the party was going out to adventure and they got driven into this small locale by the storms. So once the storms break and they become these local heroes, levels 1 to 4, as they move on at 5th level, the primary area that they were going to join this adventurers league, the city is destroyed in this sinkhole. It's nothing but rubble, but a gray spire coming out the center. And ultimately, they will find out there via NPCs that the city began to sink into this hole as this spire of gray, brimstone-smelling stone was driving up through the area. So there is the first anchor, if you will, to the gray wastes. And again, these are just ideas that started coming to me. They're not all fleshed out. I've got to do a lot of work yet to put this together. I'm just starting to take notes and jot things down so I can start creating more and more details to really drive myself into this area. But the theme for this tier is all about knowledge versus ignorance. So the people who are kind of ignorant of the kind of variance between Elysium and the Gray Wastes are going to be the ones who are suffering the most. So ultimately the goal is for the players to discover what's going on. So the adventures in this tier are going to be all about discovery, where level 1 was all about honing skills, adventuring, kind of saving the day, making sure that the meek are not as vulnerable, that kind of aspect of it. And now it's into knowledge versus ignorance. We need to find out what's going on and why. The nemesis for this story arc is this Drethel, who I still need to decide who he is and what he is. Again, I want an aspect of the Gray Wastes. He is kind of ushering in these anchor points. And these anchor points are going to be based on locations where this mystic cornucopia should be by the winter solstice is his goal. So that should cover us from levels 5 to 9, which is the biggest spread of adventuring days. Level 5, to move from level 5 to level 6 takes 2.1 adventuring days. So quite a difference from 1.5. Level 6 to level 7, 2.3. Level 7 to 8, 2.2. 8 to 9, 2.3 days. 9 to 10, 2.1 days. So a massive amount of days compared to 1 to 4. That's 11 adventuring days. 11 adventuring days. And of course, I'm not going to stack these up one after another. It's not going to be 11 days because each of these levels, basically, I want to look at as an adventure itself, as a module, if you will, an adventuring module. So we've got 5 through 9 that we want to do. My first thoughts is the first adventure, when they're level 5, moving into level 6, is going to be exploring what's going on in the ruins, basically, and the caverns moving off of this sunken city with the massive gray stone pillar. So then I need to start building on what other adventures are going to follow suit to that are going to be more dungeon delving and requiring more time. They're not going to be able to solve this in a day. They're going to have to spend a night somewhere, possibly not get a long rest, and take these longer adventuring days. But I don't want them to be one after another, after another, after another. I want to have one adventure leave some breadcrumbs to lead to the next. And I want this area here to start moving out further and further from that local area. This is where they are becoming heroes of the realm. They're going to be getting around more often in the realm itself. So really an aspect of widening that initial hula hoop that I put around the map. It'll open it up and allow them to go and explore other places and areas and things. The biggest variance is if they go out and don't follow breadcrumbs, I'll still come up with some encounters and everything, but it won't be as impactful, so they won't be able to just take 11 days in adventure and, go exploring in the hills for gnolls or goblins or anything like that and just cleave their way into getting up in level. I want the tracks laid down, and should they choose to follow the tracks, that's great. But I'm not going to railroad them at all. The adventures that I build are going to be very succinct to drive this story home. So you may call it railroading in some aspects, and that's okay. I don't mind. Let's see, where are we at on time? Oh, still good on time. So that is when they'll become the heroes of the realm. Like I said, I've got a lot of work to do there. The tier 3, when they're becoming masters of the realm, so by now they should be very familiar with the story aspects, what's going on. They should have good controls of the realms. I want them at this point to start building a base of operations and representing the area itself, carving out their own niche, and whether they're looking at a duchy of their own or building a kingdom, whatever, there's going to be more aspects of it. I don't want them to have to fight local lords and kings and everything, which starts to limit me on where I can place this, because many of these aspects are already kind of filled out from previous adventures, right? Unless we fast forward in time a long way and have some cataclysmic event go on. So there I start leaning into, well, if we're going to do this, we need to put them in an area that we haven't explored in game myself, just to allow myself the opportunity to keep what I have played with other groups still kind of the legends and lores of the game world, and keep that consistency going forward. So tier 3, levels 11 to 6, Masters of the Realm. Here's the number of adventuring days. This one goes fast. From 11 to 12 takes 2.3 days. So not too crazy comparatively to what we did in the Heroes of the Realm. But then 12 to 13, 1.4 adventuring days. 13 to 14, 1.7. 14 to 15, 1.5. 15 to 16, 1.7, and then 16 to 17, 1.7 days. So you see those number of adventuring days shrink up again. The biggest aspect of this is because they're going against higher CR creatures with more experience, and they are more apt to the magical arms and armors that they got from tier 2 plus more. So still a big growth path here for the characters. Goes by faster, so we'll have to spread it out some. Now I've done the least amount of work here. I can say that I've got Drethel still seeking out that mystic cornucopia. The theme for this tier, I want to be about empowerment. I want them to be able to have a base of operations, to have good arms and armor, magical weapons. Through the tier 2, they should start getting some of these rewards. So I want them to really start having that empowerment of they are the masters of the realm. They are the best of this realm. I want to reinforce that because I do want their confidence built up and digging into this threat, which should have been uncovered in tier 2. Now it's about making sure everything is consistent and growing, and they are the ones to take on this threat. So a lot still yet to do here before we move into level 4. Still kind of discovery, but more like a group discovery, a group dynamic discovery and self-discovery aspect for the characters. And then tier 4, This is the level 17 to level 20 where they are the masters of the world. At this point, things have grown beyond the threat of the realm alone. When the threat of the world comes to play, they should have the empowerment aspect that they are the ones to solve the problem and ultimately be able to confront it head on, even though it'll still be challenging. So here, I want to introduce a different villain that I'm just right now calling Aja, who's wanting Hecate's scepter by the planar alignment and is having difficulty getting it using patrons because of planar guardians. So a whole lot of word vomit there. So Aja, I've just thrown a name down there. She or he, they will be the villain of this tier. Very different from Drethel because now they're beyond the realm, the material planes. This Aja is going to be a threat from the Grey Wastes. Looking for Hecate's scepter, which is going to be a powerful artifact. Hecate rules from the Grey Wastes. Looking to get that by the planar alignment, because remember, the planar alignment in our prophecy was the aspect that is going to lead to that fog being released upon the world, basically. However, Aja is having difficulty getting it using patrons, and I just put patrons down as kind of a placeholder. I don't know what those are going to be. Are they going to be demons? Lesser devils? Cults? I don't know yet. I've still got a lot to explore. Because of planar guardians. So who are the planar guardians? I have no clue. I'm going to come up with something though. And the planar guardians are going to come from Elysium, because remember, I want that opposing good versus evil. The Grey Wastes represent the evil, colorless, motionless, emptiness, sorrow, pitiful, absolute horror of without. And Elysium is the polar opposite of that. So the planar guardians are going to be from Elysium, while Aja is from the Grey Wastes. And this power struggle, the theme of it is going to be the illusion of power. All the illusion. Because all of the empowerment that the players got in Tier 3 is all just an illusion if Aja gets the scepter, or if they are not good. Because if Aja gets the scepter, the Grey Wastes are going to spill out onto the material plane. Horrible for every living being on the material plane, on the world of Earth. This is going to affect them negatively. If the players are not good, the planar guardians will ensure they never get to Elysium. Regardless of law or chaos, if they're not good in the power that they've taken, they're not getting to Elysium. So the power that they've built up, if they are not good, is going to come full force down on them at this tier of play. And that is where, for this group, they're going to have kind of the epilogue piece. Generally, as I end out a campaign, I have a good epilogue. This is where the players are going to see the aspects of their characters are going to make kind of lasting epilogic pieces based on their characters' actions in the game. So everybody, when you end a campaign, they really feel their characters are, whether they accomplish their goals or not, they, generally you've got this real high feeling that they are the bomb. They are the stuff of legends. In my campaigns, because I play good versus evil kind of deals and I want the characters to be good, they will waste away to nothingness and become a larvae in the Grey Wastes if they are not good. So I'm really hoping that I set that precedent early and clearly enough for them to enjoy a more positive epilogue where they also move into Elysium to help with the Mystic Cornucopia, filling it regularly. But anyhow, for this one here, the Nemesis is this new character, Aja, and the adventurers that I've kind of thought of, how am I going to break this down for 17th moving to 18th, is going to be this battle for the planar gate. So the planar gate is going to be an aspect of it. And then levels 18, 19, and 20, I want them to move into the Grey Waste, because remember, only the Wasted Dead can show how to prevent it. Only the Wasted Dead can show how to prevent it. So what I want to do is have them move through the planes of the Grey Waste again to show that that evil aspect is going to have these negative effects on your eternal soul. But I also want to bring back some of the aspects from early. I want to call back, and maybe something in the local level where NPC has recently perished, whether it's by the storms, the sinking of the city, something. They should have to go down there into the plains to kind of figure out what is needed, how can we prevent it, and then this NPC, the spirit who is fading into nothing. Again, I haven't got all the answers figured out, but I would love to ultimately, in my mind, I would love for them to be able to glean some knowledge from this fading, wasting aspect of a spirit in the Grey Wastes and decide that it's because of good. We have to make sure there is plenty, and we have to make sure that the planar guardians are constantly filling up this mystical cornucopia for the good of the realm, as well as the good of the world. And then ultimately make sure that Aja does not retrieve this Hecate's scepter, or Hecate's scepter. So that's the aspect of this campaign. Really excited to start laying down some of the bones of this. Toe Fungus, how are you doing? For me, as I'm building a campaign, again, it's been a while since I've started a new campaign from level 1. So again, as I'm looking at some of my maps here, I really have to start thinking about where I'm going to put it, because I do want temperate climates, so I don't want to go too far north or too far south. I want to keep things more temperate, which is a little bit limiting the way that I have built my map. There aren't a whole lot of areas kind of in these aspects where you've got more temperate climates, where agriculture is definitely going to be a big aspect of the gameplay. I mean, partially this area here is going to be fairly temperate, especially the southern aspects, and then possibly the northern aspects here. But if I want to have, I suppose, possibly in I don't want it too hot or too close to the equator, because again, I want aspects of irrigation. I think is an important aspect to agriculture. So a more temperate, seasonal, big seasonal spring, summer, fall, winter aspects. So I want an area that definitely has big variances from summer growing seasons into winter dead seasons. So I will have to decide where we're going to locate this, and then I want to start building out the local area and forming out the realm from there. So I think what we're going to do for the next week's video is we will start a map for our location, our starting location, and start building a realm around that. We're going to follow right through with the Dungeon Master's Guide. So if you're new to campaign building and world building and everything, we're going to explore all the aspects of it, starting from that local level and building out with the backdrop of a pre-built world. So kind of like we talked with last week, having that overarching map that we can kind of refer to and look at different aspects of the larger picture without worrying about it and just focusing on a local level. So that is the campaign that we're going to start world building and journeying in discovery of locations, people, places, cultures, every type of aspect that we can that's going to be important to bring this game world to life for our characters. This campaign I am going to call Whispers of the Lost, because again, ultimately, I want the wasted dead to have to show or tell how to prevent the gray waste from getting a root in the material plane, spilling over and sucking more down into sorrow and despair. So Whispers of the Lost, which the kind of overarching theme is the destruction of beauty. I want to paint a beautiful world, beautiful cultures, beautiful people, beautiful civilizations, beautiful aspects of those civilizations that I can really enforce through the different tiers. I want my players to actually connect emotionally with what we're building in the game, so that when they finally get down into the gray wastes and see what will happen if they're not able to prevent this Aja from getting Hekate's scepter, I want them to really have an emotional reaction at that point and say, regardless of the cost, we're going to stop this, and we're going to make sure that the gray wastes do not have an anchor onto this material plane that we have come to know and love. So that's kind of the goal. I want to really set it up for Aja and Drethel, in fact, to look at destroying the beauty of the game world. And then hopefully my heroes, my characters, rise to the occasion to stop. We'll see. Of course, that's going to be determined in game. The best I can do is lay out the backbone of the story, build some ribs on there, which we'll do as we go through and work on building these adventures together in this civilization that we'll have to decide where it's going to be located and how we make it unique, different, fantastical, and above all else, beautiful, to create that emotional response that I want from the players so that they get deeper invested into the game and ultimately really care about their characters having a good output on the story. So I'm hoping all the work that we do is insightful and invigorating and inspirational, and ultimately really sets a tone for what we can do in fantasy world building. Next week, we're going to start right at the beginning, creating a location, a starting location, and building out from there. So make sure you join me 6:30 Central Standard Time. And each Monday, we're going to be working on this aspect until it's ready to launch. And I look forward to exploring this aspect of game building with you. Bye-bye.